This is the Brave New Coin Crypto Conversation, hosted by Andy Pickering.
Hi everyone, Andy Pickering here. I'm your host and welcome to the Crypto Conversation, a Brave New Coin podcast where we talk to the people building the future in the Bitcoin, blockchain and cryptocurrency space. My guest today is Brendan Eich. Brendan, of course, is the creator of JavaScript and the co-founder and CEO of Brave Software, who, of course, make the very popular Brave browser. Welcome to the show, Brendan.
Thanks for having me. My pleasure to be here.
Pleasure to have you here, Brendan. Look, I mean, most people will know who you are, but we'll do what we do at the beginning of the show, which is I'll invite you to please, introduce yourself, Brendan. Just love to hear a little bit about your personal story and I suppose the build up to founding a Brave Software.
Okay, yeah, I was a kid of the 1961 year. I was born on the 4th of July in Pittsburgh, and after 3 years focusing on physics, I was in Silicon Valley and realized computers were really where it was at. So I switched to math computer science and went to graduate school for 2 years at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. That was about 8 or 9 years before Mark Andreessen and company did the Mosaic browser there. So I didn't know them, and it was the old University of Illinois, but it was a top 5 CS school. Then I came to Silicon Graphics, which was really going places in mid-'80s, late 80s, and left there for a startup you've never heard of in 92 called MicroUnity. And then in 95, went to Netscape to do JavaScript. And after that, and taking it through standards, I co-founded the Mozilla organization with Jamie Zawinski and others. And we open sourced Netscape's browser code and eventually found our way independent of Netscape AOL. AOL had bought Netscape. And we did Firefox. Jamie had left, but with a very small number of people actually in the spin out from AOL, which was the Mozilla Foundation. We did Firefox with a lot of help from people who had worked in Netscape and who contributed to the code. And we retook the browser market, which is something no one thought possible. It's not common you see this sort of thing. Microsoft had monopolized it. We built Firefox up, had a partnership with Google on the search revenue side. We gave them the traffic and they gave us a share of the ad revenue, and grew Mozilla in lots of ways. Did things like the Rust programming language and many other things under the auspices of Mozilla Research, some of my friends set up and ran. Did Firefox OS, which lives on as KaiOS on the Geophone and other such phones. Nokia 8110, that used to be Neo's phone in the original Matrix. They've brought it back out in similar design anyway. And eventually left Mozilla to do Brave. I had this idea for Brave for a long time, and I realized that Mozilla, we'd gotten captured by Google, the search partner, and we were very slow to do privacy features. They didn't even do them after I left very quickly. But Brave could do something from a standing start that Mozilla couldn't risk because it had that search deal, and it was a big browser and had more at stake if it broke a website by enacting privacy shields like Brave does. So with Brave, we started with privacy first and privacy by default approach. And we also wanted to put the user in first place, which has to have real meaning. It has to align the user's interests and the browser maker's interests. So instead of the browser maker being a search and ad tech company like Google is, really an advertising company, ad tech company, I guess you would say, that treats the user as sheep to be shorn of their wool every season. Their eyeballs are monetized, as we used to say in the 90s. Brave had this idea of using some kind of cryptocurrency. Originally, we prototyped it with Bitcoin to pay the user at least what we make from private ad revenue. And private ads need explaining, so I'll hold off on that. But the idea was if we pay the user at least what we make, and it's actually 70% of the gross, then the user has to be happy or we don't survive. And our interests are aligned on that basis because there's transparency. It's an optional system. You turn it on. It's not on by default. You as the user then get paid. And if you don't like an ad, you can thumbs down it. And if you like it, you can thumbs up it. And in no case are we collecting your data. It's all done in the browser. So I'll pause there, but I wanted to say that there was a short CV to my work career, and it reflects my sort of stubbornness and sticking to things, and my desire to, sometimes to have a second run at something that I think wasn't done right in the first instance.
Yes.
And at Mozilla, that was privacy.
Yeah, that's exactly right, Brendan. And I've heard you before, in fact, talk about what you did with JavaScript and Mozilla, and then you just mentioned that partnership with Google. You probably didn't realize at the time, but yeah, you created what you've described as a Frankenstein's monster, and so that was kind of the origin story for Brave. But look, I think, Brendan, most people are aware of the trade-offs that come with using a product such as, well, Facebook or Google Chrome. But I think I'd love just to hear it from your perspective, because you can kind of outline this situation better than most. So I'd love it if you could just briefly describe the kind of the targeted advertising and invasive tracking ecosystem that typically defines the typical user experience on the internet today, and then we can sort of talk about how Brave seeks to solve it.
Sure. So, by the way, JavaScript's deeply involved in this targeting and tracking and analyzing and confirming ad technology that's used. It was originally done with images and cookies. JavaScript just added fuel to the fire. And I didn't even know, a bunch of us in that team didn't know what we were doing. We were doing things like images to let you put your cat or dog picture on your website. We were doing cookies so you didn't have to log in every time you navigated from one page to another at your bank, because that's how the web would work without cookies. The protocol is so-called stateless. It forgets anything that isn't propagated along in the URL or sent in post data if you have a form to post. So we did these things for their immediate first-party benefits. And the first party is the site you're at, like the bank. Didn't want to make you log in all the time, or you'd never use it. So JavaScript also I wanted to make for site creators to enliven their website and animate things and validate form data quickly without going to the server to get, you didn't use the right password strength or the right spelling on this state abbreviation. And JavaScript was a wild success on that basis, but something happened with images even before Netscape was founded, where you could embed them in pages. And you could embed them in a page such that they loaded from a different server. And once you do that, you've got what's called the third-party problem, which is the server that hosts the images. That's the third party. Don't ask who the second party is. It's a legal thing. It's a contractor who helped the first party, the website, build its site. But the third party is the tracker. And if you're loading images from a tracker, then by the image's name and how it's embedded in the page, the tracker can see you've gone from New York Times to ESPN, and they can build a profile for you. This became enormously valuable as a data business. So trackers would build up dossiers on users, and if they wanted to, initially it was hard to sell the data transactionally, so they would just build their own ad system, and that's what Google bought when they bought DoubleClick. I think it started as the Dart ad server in 1999 or late 90s. It may have even had earlier names that I've forgotten. By 2007, Google was eyeing it to buy it. They bought it in 2008, and they integrated it over 2 years, and that was the same time Chrome was coming out. Now, Chrome as a browser, you would think doesn't have anything to do with this. It's just another browser that's going to load images and run some JavaScript and all that. So it's not implicated in this tracking and surveillance that Google bought. But Google also had a search engine which has to track you to improve searches, or else if it forgets about you, it's not going to refine your searches based on your queries. It's just going to take the query as from some unknown user and deal with it. So Google was already getting into profiling users a little bit with the search engine, but it's still a pretty clean first-party experience. You go to a search engine, you put a query in, and you get results. And with Google, they were darn good results at the time, 2004, if you may remember. And it was also the case that, as Larry Page famously said, search is sort of like a sharing system. You give up some privacy by sending your query. A bunch of other people may be typing other versions of that query, Google can sort of analyze them with machine learning and kind of figure out the best answer for all the queries that really are asking the same question. And so that was okay, but then they bought YouTube, which had a login system, and you may recall it was not the Google account system. Then they did Chrome. At the same time, they were buying DoubleClick. So DoubleClick was the full tracking through images and scripts that I mentioned. By the way, when you embed an image from a tracking site, that's one way to do it, and that's why you still hear the term pixel used for tracking elements, even though now you can just embed invisible scripts. So JavaScript became the pixel, it became the invisible image that is embedded in all these sites by a third party and builds a dossier on you, profiles you. So Google got into this business, and by 2016, they changed their privacy policy to say, all your data belong to us. We have a unified ad exchange that we grew out of the ad business that DoubleClick had with their tracking capability and cookies. And we have YouTube, we have search, we have the Android operating system. We bought things for Android like AdMob, which is a way of doing ads on mobile. They had something they bought early on called Urchin, which became Google Analytics. And pretty soon you have this Google panopticon. And the privacy policy in 2016 was updated to reflect this. And I remember ProPublica did a piece and kind of talked about Google crossing the Rubicon, because at this point, they had to. As a public company, they're fiduciary to their shareholders, and they have to make the share price go up. And if they're just leaving money on the table by not connecting everything into one big ad exchange, they're leaving money on the table. There are other things they did that now have them in antitrust trouble in the US and got them in anti-competitive practices trouble in Europe that I don't think were justified, but I could see why they wanted to consolidate the data. So I'm picking on Google because there are many other ad tech companies, but Google is one of the biggest. Facebook is big. There are smaller ones you may not have heard of, like Criteo, a retargeting company mainly, or at least it was last I looked. And a lot of little ones that are these third-party sites you'd never go to, but they are the sites that host those scripts or those pixels that track you. And they do have a data trade now. They don't want to just collect a profile on you and sell it all at once. They like to give something like an ad exchange, sort of API access to it that you have to rent. So everyone's trying to rent the data. People talk about selling your data, but it's really more of a ongoing rental access business, and it's based on the data being more valuable if it's recent. Like only the very predictable, like you take a vacation every August and you buy stuff for it, habits are really worth saving for the long run. But 30 days history is very valuable. And this powers a lot of the public web, all the news and media sites, the publishers, the sites that depend on online ads for revenue. So they're captured by this too. They don't, or they haven't in the past at least, had enough of a subscriber base that was willing to pay. And some people talk about the internet's or the web's primal sin being that everything was free, which it sort of led to advertising as the way to cover costs. Otherwise, you were just not going to keep the lights on. And so we've seen now subscribers pay ever since 2016. The New York Times got a bump in subscriptions. The Wall Street Journal always kept their paywall pretty high, so they always had a pretty good subscriber base, business folks, traders, and so on. And more sites are getting subscribers. Substack has created a whole platform for independent writers to get subscriptions from revenue from fans. So that's great, and it shows that the web can do all these different revenue models. But ads became, the default, because at least even with Substack, you still want to give users a free taste. And with premium content sites, they still have the free leg. Premium has a free leg that they give away and try to convert you through a metered paywall that says you had 3 free articles this month, now you must pay. So ad tech became a surveillance system, which I think is a problem for users, not just because of the privacy problems that arise. I can talk about those, but it's also used by criminals. It's used in 2 ways. One is to distribute malware, which is to say fake ads that the malware distributor actually pays for. They look like real ads, but they contain a little JavaScript that starts loading exploit kit. That's a way of trying to find out if your PC, generally your Windows system, is vulnerable. And it goes down the list of browser exploits and it tries something until it works. And then it puts malware on your system, takes it over, holds it ransom. Ransomware is common. And then they make a lot of money, and that covers the small cost for the cheap ads that they ran that pretended to be from some real brand. The other kind of criminal activity is ad fraud, and that's on the other end of the system, the so-called supply side, where the publishers supply ad space. So ad fraud is where a fake publisher scrapes the New York Times and tries to trick advertisers into paying it as if it were the New York Times, because through this complex technology chain called the Lumascape sometimes, or the ad tech ecosystem, often with Google's ad exchange in the middle, nobody really paid attention to the identifier of the ad buyer and the identifier of the publisher providing the ad space, supplying the ad space. And the fake publisher didn't have the New York Times publisher ID, but nobody checked. And sure enough, the real brand, the real agency or brand that was buying that ad space paid out. And so the fraudsters got paid. And there are other harms from this system too. It's certainly used by nation states acting oppressively against their citizens. It can be used by stalkers. There was a paper the other year about using what are called geofenced mobile ads to figure out where somebody was down to the couple of meters precision. It was really terrifying. And this was using sort of open ad systems that allow you to target people. Supposedly, you're walking in an aisle in a store and they want to nudge you toward another aisle where they think your profile, your dossier indicates you might see something you'll buy. But it's a huge, huge risk if a stalker or an attacker gets a hold of this information or can access these APIs, and they can. They're pretty open, and people can pay for them, but not pay too much and do this kind of thing. So ad tech is dangerous. It's bad. You should block it. And Brave blocks it by default. And that's a tall order in itself I can get into. But most browsers, when we started, didn't block it. You had to get an extension. Yeah. And over time, other browsers have jumped on the bandwagon, though not as aggressively or thoroughly as we have.
Right. Well, so give us then, for anyone who's not aware, give us the kind of the high level overview of Brave and how that works. And I mean, from my point of view, you said it's good that people expect these products to be free, right? So of course, Brave is a free open source web browser that is simple and free to use. No problem there. But of course, I suppose one of the key differences, and you can expand on this, Brendan, is the key part is users can opt in to see ads if they wish, and hopefully those ads are relevant to them, and they can get paid in the basic attention token to see those ads.
Yes.
And of course, the next step, of course, is creators can also leverage their content to earn that as well. But just, so how does that kind of ecosystem work, and where are we at today? Because if this Brave launched in 2016, Bat came along, that all went live, you can tell me, but 2018, something like that. And so where are we now in 2022 with all this ecosystem? Is it working as intended, Brendan?
Yes, in fact, almost all our revenue until recently came from the bat-based private ads and so-called sponsored images in new tab pages. So we're still running a business here, and we're trying to prove the concept, getting to scale, getting others possibly to participate. And as the crypto world evolves, there's more and more awareness and interest, and there are more ways to, I think, capture uncaptured value or let creators get their fair share of value. So as things evolve, we're going to do even more with that. But let me back up, because what I've told you about browsers already should carry a message that may have been unclear, and I'll just clarify here.
Yes.
The browser is running all the JavaScript and the HTML rendering to put ads into pages. Those ads are not painted on the server side. It's not like an ad that's stitched into video on a Twitch stream where you have a hard time blocking that ad. It's not something that belongs to the publisher. It really is mediated through the browser, which means the browser can block those ads. It can block scripts, JavaScripts. I think you should block JavaScript. I created it in a tearing hurry, and it was useful, and I did it for the first party, as I mentioned earlier, but it's become abused by third parties. So blocking third-party scripts makes sense. And Brave does this with its Brave shields by default. And other browsers do less. They either don't block the scripts, they just kind of try to circumvent their tracking in various ways. A lot of browsers now block so-called third-party cookies, and those are the cookies that those embedded pixels will set, but not block the cookies that your bank sets, because you want your bank to put your authentication token there, so you don't have to log in all the time. That's a good use of cookies, the first party. But the third party cookies, that's commonly blocked by all the browsers but Chrome. surprisingly. I think that's all the big browsers do it. I think, I'm not sure where Edge is exactly on this, but Safari has its own way of doing it called intelligent tracking prevention. Mozilla blocks third-party cookies now. It took a while after Brave set the example, I think. And DuckDuckGo blocks third-party cookies with their browsers. They have desktop out now, I think, or soon they have mobile already. But surprisingly, Google, or not surprisingly, I was kidding, Google Chrome does not block third-party cookies. And they've announced that they're going to do it, but they keep moving the date into the future because it's the basis of most of their business. Not that they need it, because they have lots of first-party access. You go to YouTube, you go to Google, you use Google Analytics, you are a search customer, you are a Android user or a Android Google Play Store app buyer or app developer. You're in Google's ecosystem, and they're the counterparty, the first party. But Google does have publishers who insist on using third parties, and those publishers would be very unhappy, might even take class action against Google if Google just blocked third-party cookies overnight, because that would damage a lot of the ad tech ecosystem. They haven't figured out a way to replace what we call third-party cookies, which includes other storage methods now that browsers support. And that means that you can't build that dossier by embedding that little pixel or that invisible pixel.
But are you also talking about, Brendan, because I know I saw Brave have started blocking the cookie consent banners, which I think those are often the European websites with the GDPR things, if you're using Safari or Chrome or something, and you get just the first thing you go to one of those websites is they say, do you consent to using all these cookies, the most annoying thing in the world?
Yes, and it's something that came out of an earlier piece of European law called the e-privacy directive, but there are GDPR, general data protection regulation aspects to these dialogues. And the worst part is that these dialogues were the arsonists selling the firemen new fire hoses and water that might be gasoline, right? They were saying, use our consent frameworks to get cookie consents. And as one of our academic researcher friends found out, she's a paper on this, and as we found out, these consent frameworks, which are themselves a package of JavaScript, set cookies and do tracking on their own. And they do it whether you consent or not. So they do very dark things. Yeah. They operate against the publisher's interests, and they start exfiltrating data that the publisher wants to keep locked up to its subscriber database. So this consent prompt has become a plague for users. It's become a source of tracking, which it violates the law. A Belgian data protection authority said this is a violation of the GDPR, and you have to stop it. IAB Labs' trusted consent framework is illegal, and that got appealed. It's going up to the European Court of Justice, I think, very soon, and I expect that they will uphold what the Data Protection Authority in Belgium found, and this is going to be a problem for all these prompts. But Brave's getting ahead of this because these are so annoying and counterproductive and often illegal, and they're setting cookies or tracking you anyway. So we're just, with the user's consent, blocking them. And we're blocking the scripts that render these prompts. That's important, because if those load, then you sort of automate the clicking, no, I do not consent. It's not sufficient because of the dark arts that they're using to track you anyway and set a cookie right away.
Right.
So we just block the scripts. We stop the waterfall. We cut off the Hydra's head at the stump and burn it.
Yeah. Bring it back to BAT, basic attention token. So how is what's the kind of the current status of that?
So we had to figure out how to make the browser operate on the user's behalf, and since the browser's already running all this ad tech JavaScript, and we're blocking it for many good reasons, saves battery life as well, because the radio runs so much more when you load all these scripts, and they load other scripts that load other scripts. So there's a real battery life savings, 40% or more. An independent firm found this on their own. Our research team found it too, with Brave Shields. We've made a browser that now lets you be private and safe as a user, but it really cuts off that ad business that the publisher was probably relying on. We wanted to put back something to let users get, if they chose to, private ads, and if they earn a revenue share, at least what we made is 70%, so it's more, they could give it to their favorite publishers, creators, YouTubers. So we built that system we prototyped a version of it that was just for donations or contributions with Bitcoin. But we ran into problems in 2017 with the Bitcoin network getting very congested due to the block size issue. And we also found very few people with Bitcoin wanted to share it or send it. They wanted to hold it, which is very wise because it's gone up quite a bit since then. So instead of scraping, clipping corners of the coin to send, they just wanted to hold it. So we had very little participation where people brought their own Bitcoin to give it. And we did build that prototype. So we realized what we needed was a triangular flow that involved users, advertisers, and publishers. The browser would mediate the ads similarly in terms of placing images somewhere, but not in the page, to how publisher pages do it. But no tracking, no data collection. All the decision making would be in the browser based on your history there. Browsers keep your history. The dossier that these ad tech third parties compile is kind of ill-gotten tracking information. But if you're using a browser, you expect to find things in your history that you recently visited. So if you choose to participate in this Brave reward system, you get a sort of parallel history you can clear as well. And it has a little more detail in lifetime because it's the basis for local machine learning that is thereby enabled, only if you opt into Brave rewards. Two, look at your intent. Look at what you're doing, navigating, searching e-commerce terms into e-commerce sites, all of that, and try to find the best ad from a catalog that's sent to you. And this catalog approach means we're pushing the ads, or really links to the ads. We're not pushing the giant, images and videos, of course. We're pushing links to the ads and keywords about the ads. Each row in the catalog has the address of the creative unit, as it's called, the ad, and the keywords about it. And the machine learning can then look at the keywords and pick the best ad in the catalog to show. And you can control the frequency up to a maximum frequency cap that prevents abuse. And you can lower the frequency if you don't like ads that often. These ads shouldn't come up when you're doing a full screen, Zoom call or presentation. They shouldn't come up when you're watching a movie. We can avoid bothering you when you're moving the mouse or touching the touchpad a lot. All this local intelligence can make a much more pleasant ad experience that the user is in control of, and the user gets 70% of the revenue. Now, there's a further trick to things than just the catalog and the browser-based matching, because that takes care of not tracking the user's data and doing centralized matching. And the machine learning can do a pretty good job personalizing. It won't do the things Facebook loves, which is to get all of us in one big database and then look for lookalikes. My lost twin, I have a real twin actually, but my lost twin who acts just like me in the Midwest and just bought a car, so they're going to predict I'm going to buy a car. I'm not sure how valuable that data is. Facebook hyped it up over the years, and it's really not clear. But we can't do that kind of thing, at least not without much more intensive research and development. But I don't think that's necessary. So we're making money from these private ads. And then the final trick I mentioned is to confirm that you actually saw the ad. And that involves a cryptographic protocol. And people hear about cryptocurrency, called crypto for short. And all my cryptographer friends get mad because they say cryptography was the first crypto. We're the real crypto, And they're right, because cryptocurrency gets the crypto from cryptography because it heavily is indebted to cryptography. It uses cryptography, it uses digital signatures and various proof systems, Merkle trees, all these great inventions of the big brains who founded modern computer science cryptography. So we are using a cryptographic protocol that blinds our confirmation server, I'll call it, the server that sees that somebody saw this ad, as to your identity, as to any other ads you may have seen, as to whatever pages you were looking at. We don't see your history, but the server sees that you had an authentic view of an ad that was from the catalog. And that allows us to get paid and then share the 70% with the user. So we've turned ad tech on its head. We've taken it out of the cloud where it was predicated on massive data collection, which started with things like Google search or with DoubleClick's ad server in the 90s. We've turned it around so that it's personal and local. It's in your browser where the JavaScript for ad tech already runs if you don't block it. And we've dealt the user in at the front of the revenue line, and we've given them all the controls they need to make it a pleasant experience and turn it up or down if they want more or fewer. Yeah.
Well, so Brendan, you mentioned cryptocurrency, and look, obviously BAT's a crypto asset, and I want to talk about all the different ways that Brave is supporting the emergence of Web3. But just last point on, I guess, ad tech, I saw that Elon Musk, who of course has just taken over Twitter, he tweeted earlier today a letter to, he said, "Dear Twitter advertisers," and he had this letter, and I don't know if you saw that, but one of the things he said in the letter was that he thought that low relevancy ads spam, but yet highly relevant ads are content. And I thought that's quite a good way of framing ad tech. If we think of ad tech as in some ways necessary to fund the use of free products for the average user, but there's very much a difference in that quality control, and the average person, if they can see really highly engaging, relevant ads that speak to them in some way, that can be considered content. Do you agree with Elon there?
So for Twitter, it's a little different. Let me first say that something came up while we were founding Brave, and was a hype cycle within ad tech. It was called native ads, and it meant what you might call advertorials, or ads that were beautiful and looked like content. And in the best case, ads already did that. If you went to, I don't know, Hearst Media owns ELLE, the fashion site, and if you went there, the whole front page was dominated by one big sponsor image, and it was a beautiful ad, and you could click on it and get a video carousel of whatever. That's a valuable and native kind of ad that L users want. So, in principle, there's nothing wrong with certain ads that are beautifully done and integrated into the site. And in fact, Brave does not block first-party ads. Unfortunately, we found that L was using Google to place that ad, even though it was directly sold by her sales team and the brand was the buyer. They were using Google's ad tags in the page to place that ad. And we found that we could just replace 3 of them, make that ad reappear, but then the payments wouldn't flow from the brand who bought it, because there was a further partner Hearst used, which was an awful data tracker. And we definitely blocked that one. And there was no way to sort of mock up its JavaScript and get payments through. But we don't object to first-party ads if they are clean, or if we can neutralize the tracking and let them perform. And one of the easiest ways for them to perform is if you click on that beautiful first-party ad and you land on a separate page that allows you to buy something or sign up for something, no problem. That's just the web. That's like National Geographic having a wildlife fund charitable drive with a big beautiful image of an animal, and you click on it and you go sign up to give money. So we don't block those things if we can help it, but unfortunately a lot of them married the ad tech zombies, the zombie surveillance squad. And so we do block them. And to finish the bat story, we needed a triangular flow that dealt the user in. Bitcoin required the user to bring the Bitcoin and send it. And I've talked to others, like OpenBazaar's founder said, we're thinking about adding other species than Bitcoin. I said, I thought you guys were Bitcoin maximalists. And he said, yeah, but nobody wants to send it. They want to hodl it. And I said, yes, hodl your Bitcoin, because it's getting more valuable and there's only going to be 21 million, right? This is the theory. So I don't know if they added ETH and other things. I've lost track. But with that, we had our own token on Ethereum. It's now bridged to Solana and many other chains through Wormhole and other bridges. It's bridged through the Aurora Rainbow Bridge to the Near blockchain. So BAT's got this independence that allows us to integrate it into Brave and potentially be integrated into other apps in a way that shares revenue with users while not raiding their privacy. And that's why we use the equilateral triangle for the BAT logo with little colors to enliven the pure geometry. And we're adding more utility all the time. I can't talk about everything we're doing with BAT, but we've already got a VPN product. And the first thing our VPN partner, Guardian iOS app, that's their Twitter handle, said is we're going to support BAT for day passes. And that, I think that hasn't happened yet, but I think it will. What Elon said could be true of native ads or good ads in general, first-party ads. And Twitter is the first party you're going to. And so they could do really good promoted tweets. I see promoted tweets. With Brave's Shield, you can set them on a per site or global basis to aggressive, or you can turn them off. Some people on Twitter set them to aggressive, and we will block those promoted tweets. I have to say, before Elon stepping in, I've been tempted, because the promoted tweets I see are generally off the mark and not well targeted. But if he can fix things so that I get promoted tweets that are really good for me in truly good ways. I wouldn't want to block them in their first party ads. So I hope that answers the question. The trick for something like Twitter is to, again, not raid your privacy and sell your data or use third parties to help target you, but just directly sell ads and do some kind of matching. Now they're matching on the cloud side. They're definitely doing all that kind of, double regression, these kind of studies for lookalikes, with a big database full of user data, because they have that data. Because when you're browsing Twitter, it's even though it's a lot of client caching, and they have basically a web app on almost all their devices, including my iPad. It's heavily server data collection based. But I could see ways to do a Brave-like approach that's client-centric and uses blockchain. And I hope Elon considers that, because it's a good approach.
Well, I think you probably know what you're talking about, Brendan, because I'm just looking at your Twitter profile, and you've sent an astounding 119,000 tweets. So you're a Twitter power user, if ever I've seen one, which I love. Well, here's a quick just a side note on Twitter then. So everyone on Twitter, you've probably seen the the spam bots, right? They're particularly a problem, in the kind of in crypto Twitter, right? Because you know, there's all these nefarious actors that are just trying to scam innocent users out of their crypto any way they can, and on Twitter,
it's horrible.
They use spam bots, and particularly on Elon's tweets, you'll see all these spam bot replies. And I always see there's one narrative from, I guess, the programmer side. People say, well, if Twitter wanted to solve the spam bot problem, it is a very simple fix. They should have done this a long time ago. You've probably got some pretty good insight into that problem. Why haven't they solved that problem? And do you think Elon will be able to do so fairly swiftly?
I've seen people say it could be solved quickly, and they sometimes say by insisting on real names and getting people to verify their identity. I think Twitter doesn't want to do that for good reasons, because it would obligate it as a data collector under European law and other law. It would make it hold a bunch more valuable information that could be stolen for identity fraud, identity theft. And it isn't necessary. And in some cases, it can be dangerous. And in certain parts of the world, pseudonymity, as Twitter affords, is necessary, or your government will go after you. And I don't know if that's coming to the U.S. Canada had issues with the truckers, so I'll just leave it at that and say that governments can be a threat in any realistic threat model. And so Twitter doesn't want to force identification. But here's the thing that I've found with crypto: forcing some kind of identity verification doesn't get rid of fraud. It's just raising the fixed cost of fraud that the fraud actor has to amortize over enough fraud acts to recoup the cost. And so I think if these bots are working scams, they'll just work harder and cover the cost of identity verification. A lot of identity images are stolen. A lot of them are procured by paying somebody in part of the world where money goes further and people are poorer to take a picture of their passport or their driver's license and sometimes take a selfie with it. And then that gets used completely criminally, independent of the person who took the picture. So I think identity verification is wrong. It's not required. It can be harmful, and it should not be required. And it isn't enough to stop the spam bots or whatever they are, the fraud bots. What should be used and can be used is machine learning. It's hard, but our chief scientist now has done work on this, even going back 12 years, with enough natural language processing and studying the sort of connections among the spam bots. They all follow each other. They all have relationships. They often form little clouds that if you visualize them, a friend formed a visualization company called Graphistry, and he showed me an image of this. It looked like a tick attached to a deer, and it was bloated up, sucking blood, but it was really a cloud of fake bots, all connected by their follows and retweets and likes. And they were all sort of scratching each other's backs to build fake reputation with Twitter. And then where the tick's fangs would have been, there was one fake account that was fooling some real human into giving up his credit card or his World of Warcraft login or something like that. Yeah. And that's how it works. So if you study the behavior and the text of the tweets and the connections between the bots, you can block them. But it's a lot of work. It's an ongoing adversarial game, as all machine learning is. But it can be done. And Twitter has not done it. They've not done it at all. They've done a lousy job.
That's right. And look, I want to start moving towards Web3, Brendan. But
Yes.
Twitter's kind of a fun place to start, since we're talking about Twitter. And with Elon taking over, it seems there's a lot of speculation that Elon will start to enable even more crypto services or crypto products within Twitter. We kind of, Twitter are doing that already, but perhaps Elon will speed it up, and if he does, it will no doubt involve a Dogecoin.
Yes.
Yeah, but one other thing I wanted to ask you about, Elon said a week or two ago, maybe 3 weeks ago, he said that one of the reasons he was buying Twitter is because he saw it as a kind of a turbocharged first step into creating the everything app. So you'd be aware of the kind of they have, everything apps in China, WeChat and things like that. We don't really have an equivalent in the West, but it seems like that might even ruin Twitter. But what do you think of that plan of Elon to potentially turn Twitter into an everything app? Is that a fool's mission?
Yes, I think the Twitter app for Elon's X app, the everything app, is a poor starting point. I think Brave is much better because we've done a lot of the privacy research and the cryptocurrency and token integration. And we have a super app approach, which is the phrase I think Connie Chen and Andreessen Horowitz coined for WeChat. It's an app you almost live in. Now, we didn't have a messenger. We had a browser, and we added things to it, including Brave Talk, which is like a Zoom, a freemium Zoom, and it has better encryption. And it's partnered with a company that does really good on the server side, but we offer an encrypted bridge so you can have video call privacy. We're building the super app. We haven't integrated social because social involves a massive collection of data, at least as it's currently done. There's probably ways not to do that, but I think the idea of a super app could come to the West, and it should in some ways come if it serves the user first. And that's what we're trying to do with Brave. If Twitter does a super app and they're a public company, or even with Elon taking them private, they're still under pressure to perform. I fear they'll be dragged back into the ad tech world of data collection and money making through these sort of side deals with data brokers and other interests, that they won't do a private ad system as we've done. But never say never. Elon's deep thinker. Maybe he'll build something similar to what we've built, or he'll come up with something better. But I think he might also like Brave, and who knows what if he puts in an offer for us, we might have to consider it seriously. The real idea here is that users, at least in China with WeChat, and I think this is true in a lot of places, do find that you spend a lot of time in one app. And it's true that the browser still gets a lot of your digital life, but some people, young people, may be on a messaging app a lot. TikTok has obviously come to the fore. Some people spend a lot of time on YouTube, though I'll say Brave is a much better YouTube app than the YouTube app because we block those pre-roll, mid-roll, and footer ads. We make things much, much, much more pleasant on YouTube. And we have features. One of them is already shipping in iOS called Playlist that allow you to time shift videos so you can watch them while you're on a plane. Can't pirate them, but you can shift them around and save them for later. And that's been very helpful for us in distinguishing Brave from other browsers, and we're going to keep doing this. So I think the super app idea is good, and I wish Elon luck with the X app idea. I think he'd get ahead if he talked to me.
You gotta go see him at Twitter HQ and start the conversation
with his sync.
That's right. Yes. Let the sink in. Let that sink in. All right. So Web3 then, Brendan. So, you've been enabling various crypto products at Brave, much as, the Twitter team have. So you've got, there's the Brave wallet and so on. I'd love to just hear from you, I suppose, what you understand as Web3 and the kind of advantages it enables everyday internet users and how you hope to support them, and also maybe just a sense of the battle that we're up against if we are trying to build this decentralized internet. There's some big centralized players that are in the way, right?
Yes. So Web3 is not well defined. A lot of people are interested in it, excited about it without knowing what it is.
Yes.
But I think the best way to predict the future, as Alan Kay said, is to invent it. So Brave's out there in the forefront, working with others, including some of these blockchains I've mentioned. And we have the wallet you mentioned, the self-custody wallet, which is multi-chain. We have Ethereum and all the EVM compatibles like Polygon and even the Avalanche C chain. We have Solana, and we're adding others. We will indeed, I believe, have things that are UTXO based, so Bitcoin, Litecoin, Zcash, Doge. But this is a self-custody wallet built into Brave. So people are used to using MetaMask, which is an extension on browsers, and its extensions are not happy because browsers keep closing down their API, especially Google. When you think about Web3, it shouldn't be something you have to add onto your browser. The browser should just do it. The servers should do it. There will be servers. I agree with Moxie Marlinspike, the Signal co-founder, who wrote an essay earlier this year about how Web3 and decentralization often get oversold and means to some people that you're going to live on the blockchain and everything will be through distributed ledger technology. And he observed several things. One is, first of all, servers are still darn useful, and you can use cryptographic protocols like we use with our ad confirmations to preserve privacy properties, unlinkable identity and anonymity like we do, without having a blockchain. And also blockchains by themselves are public ledgers, which means you can be re-identified from them, like Chainalysis does for all the government agencies and law enforcement. So privacy really needs an X app, a thick muscular app like Brave. It needs a super app, and it needs better blockchains over time. And some of them do have zero knowledge proof based anonymity or shielded transactions, as Zcash calls them. So there's a world of Web3 that includes servers, clients or browsers, and blockchains, but it's not any one of them that's going to dominate. They're all going to be part of the orchestra, and the way they play together is through more cryptography, and that cryptography has several properties. It preserves user sovereignty, especially if you're using self-custody wallets like Brave's. You're in charge of the assets. You're your own bank. You're not holding them with a custodian that might seize them or undergo bankruptcy and have to, grab them for liquidation purposes. If you read the fine print, you're not putting them at risk with somebody else who has the key. And as the Bitcoiners say, not your key, not your coin. So Web3 really does want users to come first and counterparty to be across a peer-to-peer network if possible, or across a very narrow connection that doesn't have all these ad tech intermediaries, all these parasites and middle players and criminals. So I think it's about disintermediation, direct connections, fan to creator, like you can do with Brave Rewards. You can tip your favorite YouTubers, even if Google won't pay them, or I should say YouTube won't pay them, Alphabet, YouTube. You can do things that cannot be disrupted or blocked or censored. And that's an important property. And it doesn't mean everything's only on a public ledger or any ledger. And it does require privacy. So there have to be options other than public ledgers. But to me, that's Web3. It puts the user first, gives you self-sovereign identity, which means you're in charge of your names and pseudonyms. And you're in charge of when you get identified and when you don't. It gives you self-custody. So you hold the funds because you hold the key. And ideally, you have a quality hardware key like a ledger. Nano. I just got a Nano X recently.
Yes.
And that Web3 then looks a lot like a better web, a user-first web. We lost that with Web2. We thought we were getting, social web and the user-generated content web like YouTube was in 2006 when Google bought it. But the price was too high. It was this data collection, surveillance, censorship, control, and monopoly consolidation. Like monopolies always go wrong. If we can bust those trusts, not just through law, which is happening slowly, but through our own actions as users, valuable users, lead users, as the MIT professor Eric von Hippel calls them, we can move markets. And it only takes a few percent of the users, the lead users, to really change markets, as many have observed. So that's another thing I'm working on Web3 for. It cannot be, Google's Web3, just like the metaverse cannot be Meta's, Facebook's metaverse. It has to be an open system based on open standards. It has to have interoperation among different independent implementations of servers and clients and middle boxes. And I believe Web3 has to have cryptography, such that you can go peer-to-peer, you can cut out all intermediaries, you can go directly on a blockchain to transact. You can also use cryptographic protocols to shield your identity. You can form, multi-party relationships, multi-party computing protocols, zero-knowledge proof protocols. There's lots of interesting Lego blocks to combine here in new ways that people are already using to build things like decentralized autonomous organizations. And you've probably seen, there's been regulatory action recently in the U.S. I believe the CFTC, and we're in a tricky space right now. Apple, for its part, you're mentioning the behemoths, the big tech monsters. Apple, whose gear I do buy, just revised its rules to take control of its ecosystem and prevent crypto and NFTs from being traded outside of its system, insisting on its vigorous 30% in-app purchase. And that's just ridiculous. This is like something out of a Western where the villain owns the company town and starves the workers and makes them earn scrip, and they can only use the scrip in the company store. I mean, this is just, Apple should be ashamed. It's not going to last, but that's what they're going to do while they have the brand halo. They even have a bit of a privacy halo, and they command a premium for their lovely hardware.
They sure do. All right, well, let's, conscious of time, Brendan, let's just finish off this part of the podcast. Just what are you working on right now? What's coming next? I know you've got some presentations at a web summit coming up. Anything you can tease coming down the product pipeline? What's next? So
Brave is not just a browser. We're a super app. We're building in other features. Maybe there'll be Messenger. I have ideas for social that I've talked about on Twitter, so I can briefly sketch them. If you think about Brave's browser-based with blockchains and cryptographic protocols approach, we don't need to make our own Twitter. And people sometimes use Twitter, or they use Mastodon, or they use both. What if you could, in the browser, sort of keep track of people across those networks, and you could save your own posts, because they're very small. They're smaller than all the pictures I take and the videos I take. And I do attach images to them, but those can be saved too. Then you'd own your own data, and you could never be suspended and lose your Twitter stream. It would be backed up. You could also track your friends across different sites. You could switch, if you didn't like Twitter for any reason, it doesn't mean they have to suspend you, because they'll leave you alone if you stay polite generally. But that's not always true. It's increasingly not true. But if you just don't like the way they're acting, or the way they were acting before Elon bought them, you can switch to a different network, and your friends could continue to track you through your address book, your contacts app on iPhone. You would just have extra data in there linking their different social identifiers, and you would never lose track. You would have your own posts backed up, so you could replay them in a new network if you wanted to start over instead of starting cold, which is always daunting. This kind of social front end, browser-based aggregator, it's actually a disaggregator and reaggregator, is something I'd like to build. I haven't done it, but I've been talking about it so much, I better go do it. We're also a search engine. Brave bought Brave Search, and Brave Search is getting good. It's getting up toward 6 billion queries a year if you annualize from our 20 million a day. It's 18 million a day. It's getting to the point where a lot of users are finding that they don't need to use Google, and that's a tall order. But Brave Search also uses a user-first, client-first approach. We don't have to crawl the whole web. We let our users' searches and the results that they prefer guide us. And those users who want to can enable something called the Web Discovery Project in the search settings in Brave to contribute anonymized extra data to help us improve the search engine. And that means we can grow and compete without having to be as good as Google before we get any users. And I'm working on something for Brave Search I can't talk about, but I want to decentralize things about search. And this is hard. I mentioned early on, Larry Page said it's a sort of a sharing system with some compromise on privacy, because you all send your queries up to Google, and Google that gives the best answers. And just deciding what the best is an approximate and continuously updated process. And there's no absolute objective best. So that so far means search algorithms are centralized, and I'm not here to say we can decentralize them. And you may know of the pre-search project. They don't decentralize. They simply use a bunch of APIs like Google's APIs, Bing's. I think they mostly use Google from their nodes on their blockchain to answer queries, and they have a staking model for keywords for revenue. Brave Search isn't going to use Google except as a fallback, like we use Bing, and you can read about how we do that on our site. And it's very light. It's like less than 8% of queries go to the Bing fallback, and users have to turn on the Google fallback, which is done in the browser. Another win of having a browser is you can make the browser do the work and preserve privacy and mash up some Google results that you anonymously query Google over if you think Brave's not going to have the best answers. And that's always true for very rare keywords. But there are aspects of search that can be decentralized rather quickly, and I'm working on that. So I hope that is a good teaser, because I can't say more.
I love it. All right, thank you, Brendan. Let's go to a very quick break, and then we'll come back. We'll have some fun. We'll finish off. We'll run Brendan through the very famous Crypto Conversation hot take round.
For crypto indices and benchmarking, Brave New Coin's powerful indexing engine can calculate high-frequency intraday and end-of-day indices for a wide range of index products. Brave New Coin's custom indices team delivers experienced consultancy, premium data, and trusted calculation. Contact BNC today to find out more.
And we are back, and I'm with Brendan Eich, of course, the CEO of Brave Software and the Brave browser. Brendan, fantastic talking to you today. I like to finish each podcast with a very quick round of rapid-fire crypto conversation hot takes. Are you up for it?
I think so.
Just going to run some questions at you, Brendan. You're a talker, so I just want you to answer them as quickly as you can, hot take style. Question one is, where would you say that you sit on the Bitcoin maximalist to multi-chain opportunist spectrum?
I'm a pragmatist. I'm in the middle. I think Bitcoin has great advantages, first of all, by Satoshi's white paper, coming out so early, and by being digital gold, or I think focusing on store of value, and by having the 21 million cap, and having some brilliant innovations over time, not just at the beginning. I have to give Bitcoin a lot of respect, but I'm not an exclusivist or maximalist. I think there's more to say and do and research on blockchains, and Bitcoin's not the last word, like something God wrote on tablets for all time. So I'm a pragmatist. I'll use what works, and Bitcoin works well for some things, and we use other chains for other things.
I love it. All right. Well, Brendan, Bill Gates famously said that we tend to overestimate what we can accomplish in 2 years and underestimate what we can accomplish in 10. You'll be familiar with this as a developer yourself. But with that in mind, let's, whatever you like, Web3, Metaverse, Brave, look, what does it all start, the super app, what does it all look like in 10 years' time?
Yeah, I think the metaverse is actually, if it's really meta, it applies to things like social. So we shouldn't lose our game assets if we're running, playing Fortnite in a future metaverse, and we go through a portal into a classic game we love to play still. We should have NFTs for our game assets. We should have our cryptocurrencies in our wallet, because those should be portable across worlds. And this applies to social networks, it applies to websites. Nobody wants to have to use only this coin to buy at this e-commerce site and that token to buy at that e-commerce site. So I think factoring things into a user-first platform, a super app, a super browser that has crypto and privacy features is critical. And I think that's going to happen. Whether Brave succeeds or we become part of we become the trailblazer and others follow us, it's going to happen.
Yeah, I love it. All right, the flip side of that, of course, is a famous quote by William Gibson, Brendan, who, of course, said that the future is already here, it's just not evenly distributed. With that in mind, can you think of an example of the future being here right now, but most people aren't aware of it?
Yeah, I think if you look at some of the people, I think unbanked, I don't know how they're doing in the crypto winter we're in, but some people are living as true crypto natives, and they are trying to avoid the old world. And it's not always possible. It's not possible for me with a family, but I admire that. And that's certainly the future that's not evenly distributed.
Yep, the sovereign individuals. I love it. All right, we're almost done here, Brendan, but time to zoom out, time to get weird just for a second. What do you see as the long-term future for the human race? Do you see dystopia or utopia?
Well, as a software person, I have to be neurotic about the details, but an optimist, or I'd never get started. So I'm an optimist, and I think there's a better world to come, but it's not entirely up to us. And the part that is up to us, we know what to do, but not everybody's doing it. I'm afraid people are being naughty, and that's something we all have to work at Solzhenitsyn said, evil is not that group over there versus us. It's a line that cuts through every human heart. So
yeah,
I take that seriously.
All right. Final question, Brendan. What is your favorite science fiction book, film, or TV show?
Oh boy. The films, so the recent Dune was good, but if you look at what's the most fun to watch, I think James Cameron's Aliens or Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan.
Yes.
And of course, the original Star Wars trilogy has special place because I was young.
Yeah.
If you look at books, I still think very highly of Dune, which I read as a teenager. It's kind of for teenagers, I think. And I love the old Niven and Corneli stuff too. I'm a hard SF nerd.
Fantastic. I love it. Okay, final bonus question for you, Brendan. You can answer this if you want or not. What happened to Google's search results? Why have they fallen off a cliff? Why is Google search just not what it used to be? It's no good now.
Yeah, that's what happens to monopolies. Remember, Microsoft became a monopoly and Internet Explorer and Windows became terrible?
Yeah. Google
has crossed everything, crossed all the streams like you shouldn't do in Ghostbusters. They've made an ad exchange to tie everything together. And on my iPhone, when I use Google Search, Google's ads push all the organic results down below the bottom of the phone screen. Yeah. So Google is its own worst enemy here. Yeah. And that's how monopolies end.
Yeah.
It may take a century.
And well, maybe that'll happen to Apple next. Fantastic talking to you today, Brendan. Thank you so much for coming on the show. Nothing else to say except, well, could you please tell people where they can find you on Twitter, because you're obviously a massive Twitter nerd, which we love to see. And of course, again, just make the case for if people out there have not tried Brave, and I don't know why they wouldn't, we'll tell people why they should and how they should do so.
Right. I'm Brendan Eich, all run together, EICH on Brave, on Twitter. Also, Brave is just @Brave, so you can find me if you look at @Brave, you'll see me among the followers, and you'll see me retweeted by our account there. You should use Brave because we put the user first in every way, and we prove it by paying you at least what you make from optional private ads, and we have other options coming for sharing value with users, helping them create more value over time and get their fair share of it.
I love it. Thank you so much, Brendan. All the best, and bye for now.
Thank you.
All right, there you go, team. That was Brendan Eich, Brendan from Brave. That was a fun one. Man, yeah, Brendan, very smart guy, really gets into the nuts and bolts of how things work. Absolutely fascinating. Really enjoyed that. Yeah, well, if you're still listening here at the end of the show, thank you for listening. I do hope you enjoyed that. Yeah, have you tried Brave? I mean, I imagine you probably have. I use Brave. I must admit, I mean, I don't use Brave as my only browser. I use a few different browsers for different purposes, different platforms. I guess most people do that. But of course, yeah, I mean, Brave's a great browser. It's fast, it's slick, it does block those ads, and you can earn, yeah, I mean, little amounts, but you can earn BAT for using Brave, really, which is cool. I do like Brendan's vision of Web3, and fascinating that he sees Brave as a potential starting point for the Everything app, which does actually make sense to me. So, look, we'll see. Can he continue, or can he start the conversation with Elon Musk? Who knows? Speaking of Elon, what happens to Twitter? I mean, man, it's going to be fun. Going to be fun to see. All right, better leave it there. Thank you for listening. Don't forget to subscribe to the Crypto Conversation in whatever podcast app you are using. And yeah, give us a 5-star rating, give us a nice review, all that good stuff. Thank you. This was the Crypto Conversation for Brave New Coins.